All right, now it's your turn. EPN Zone is fun, fast, and community-led. No slides, no formal recap, and honestly, to a certain extent, no prep for this. We're just real talk about what landed, what challenged you, and what you're taking back to work on immediately. Please welcome to the stage Carter Parrish and Gurlene Kaur to guide the conversation.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Carter. How's it going? How's the morning so far?
Morning's been great. Just gem after gem being dropped on these
I
sessions.
know, I know. We have a very strong theme going on. I think for me, I felt very seen with some of these sessions. I think the biggest theme that I've really taken away, especially being a field marketer, is really kind of how to become that executor to becoming that strategic sort of influence in the room. And it's definitely a pattern that I can see in my career. How about you, Carter? What's been a main takeaway for you? And everyone in the chat, how's it going? How's the morning? And feel free to share any learnings or places where you felt seen this morning?
Yeah, I wrote down a couple of words that kept coming up, and the big thing that Rich talked about first, and Nick mentioned it. I heard it in every session was value of time. Time is our greatest asset, and being able to be impactful with that. I wrote down impact, influence, trust, journey were some of the big words that I've heard resonate across all three sessions, and creating those touch points and those moments and those safe spaces for people to come in and really make an impact and do meaningful stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think speaking of impact, it's really, it's one thing to talk about a really great event and event execution, but really, how is that showing up strategically? How is the work that you're doing, the campaigns that you're running, how are they actually impacting like the bottom line, pipeline, things like that? That's again, very relatable for me. How about everyone else in the chat? Feel free to share as well. But that's something that I've seen change throughout my career, where a lot of times you're asked to become the executor, come in, do this for us. And I love my sales teams, but I think like within we learned, or we all, I think, have used no as a full sentence. That's one of my favorite lines. And I do that with a lot of kindness and empathy. That doesn't mean you're not, I think it's the difference between being nice and being kind, right? It doesn't mean that you're not there. You're there as we're here as one band, one sound with our sales teams. It depends on, of course, what function you sit at, but it's really what are we doing and how are we impacting that bottom line? And I think that example, and I'm probably not the best with names, but I believe it was Nick who mentioned that really once you kind of prove that value, they start to actually turn to you, as someone to say, hey, actually, now that you have impacted pipeline, how do we actually turn to you to get ideas versus, hey, Gurlene, do you have a second? How about, can you run this one event for me? But yeah, Carter, how about you? You're
Yeah,
an event producer. So, I mean, what are some of the takeaways that you've gotten from some of these sessions that you feel like either reinforce something that you've been feeling? This is really, really off track, but when we first kicked off our first session, I'm a big scent person, right? So they were talking about, I think, bringing in experiential elements. I think customers was one of them, but I think it was like having citrus in the room to wake people up versus, even though everyone loves a cookie, right? So the DoubleTree cookie. But that was really cool of like, how are you adding different elements to your experience?
yeah, a couple of things that have resonated over these sessions, and I love the DoubleTree cookie as well. But these moments don't have to be big, expensive things. It's can be
Right.
small, subtle things that, you know, all it has to do is really impact or cause a feeling or create a nostalgic moment for one person. And then, people trust other people. I've always believed in that when it comes to events for brands or even internally, is when you get that buy-in from everyone and everyone's aligned on the story and the goals, and they push that message out to everyone in an immersive, impactful, meaningful way. Let others tell that story for you rather than you tell people how they should feel, how they should react to a brand or a product or a service. Is let those people go out and create that community and tell that story for you. I heard that Nick and Rich mentioned it about, if you don't have that buy-in from everyone in your own house, it's going to be really hard for those other people to feel that same connection, which is something that I try to achieve myself and as with the company. And anything that we do from an experience perspective is create that connection. So connection and trust are those two things that I've heard multiple times. And I think I probably wrote it down 17 times between all the sessions where it's been mentioned. But those are two that really drive a lot of what you do, whether it's driving pipeline, just creating an experience, brand awareness, any of those things are so important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as you were saying that, it reminded me of a line that I wrote down, which was, which I loved, which was an event without a strategy is a brand expense, right? And we all love a good brand expense. But at the end of the day, I mean, whether you're an event producer or you're a field marketer, there has to be, even if you're running internal events at an organization, there has to be a greater bottom line than that. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think Lisa also mentioned a poll, I think from one of the sessions earlier about thinking about your run of impact and not just the run of show, where you're leading with insight and not just logistics, right? And I think that's so important. And I think Evan was also talking about how do you help your stakeholders and your partners, but also protect your personal space. I think everyone, I'm sure in this room, I think I can speak for, I think I'm confident enough that I can speak for all event marketers that we stretch ourselves way too thin, and protecting our calendars. That's something, I got a little fluff from, when people are, you are asked to kind of be likable, right? Oh, can you run this one event? Can you do this? But when you start protecting your calendar, it may not be, especially when and I was thinking about this, if you're already at an organization, here's a question I would ask as an audience member, and probably an answer I'll give out loud from my perspective is, if you're coming in and let's just say you've already set the tone of someone who is likable, that'll take that one extra piece of collateral or that one extra project or deck on, how do you make that shift once you recognize that this is an issue? And there is a speed bump, right? Of course, when you're already leading with a certain type of energy, but slowly starting to protect your calendar. I think one of the speakers mentioned, take a look at your calendar. Is there 2 or 3 places in your calendar that you can adjust and pull back? And I think it's making those little adjustments. And of course, you have an excellent opportunity once you learn that lesson, when you go into a new organization, to say, well, this is just how so-and-so does things. And you teach them that this is how we do things. And again, it's not about justifying what we aren't doing, but it's actually about, doubling down on what we are saying, hey, these are the campaigns we're running. These are the events that we're running. What are our bottom line focus areas, and how are we making sure we're not splitting our focus in 3 to 5 different directions and saying, okay, let's put our focus down on this and this. I think it was the example of a product marketing launch, right? And that product marketing launch was what actually led to revenue generation. I think that was, again, a tidbit from Nick's presentation that I think I took away.
Yeah. I mean, again, at the end of the day, it's all about alignment and communication amongst the groups. It only works if you're all communicating together and understanding what everybody's goals are. Everyone has different measurements for success, and the events and experiences industry as a whole has already had trouble showing ROI on things because it's hard to tie that thing. But, I've learned something a few years ago that I've tried to monitor a little bit more, is that return on emotion. How are people feeling when they came in and when they left? That's a little bit easier to manage. And then now pushing that further, how can we track that, and what does that mean for growing the pipeline or growing brand awareness or growing those things? So ROE is something that, we should definitely be paying more attention to as we move forward in creating those events.
Yeah, and especially with the cost of these experiences going up, it's really about making sure, yes, of course, you want to make sure they have an excellent experience, but one, we have to kind of go to bat at times. How can I justify the cost for some of these experiences? And I know we're running out of time here, but just really making sure that when we do execute, that we really do, again, get that ROI and the ROE, like you mentioned.
Well, thank you both so much, and thank you for everyone who jumped in on the conversation.